Hello HEMA friends and welcome to this new video. So today we are here with the new Corona feather made by Ensifer. I have already said you in the community section that I was going to review this sword because Ensifer sent it to me some weeks ago. And of course I had time to test it in sparring. I had the occasion to do some practice, some exercises with it. And today we are going to review this beautiful sword. So let's start. Now the first thing which is easy to notice on this sword is the thickness of the edge. Now compared to all the other feathers that Ensifer made, this feather have the edges which are far more thick. They start from a 6 millimeter thickness at the shield basically, and they end with a more or less 3 millimeters thickness edge at the tip. So this is of course, at least in my opinion, the best feature of this sword, because it makes the sword far more resistant and far more durable during the months of practice. Now I have already had different sparring sessions, basically 6 or 7 sparring sessions, some of them quite hard, and I can't notice basically any big damage on the edge. So the edge is basically still perfect. And this is because of the new form of the edge, this new thickness and the form, which is kind of useful in this sense. So it's extremely durable in my opinion. So probably the most important thing of this sword, in my opinion, is durability, which is far more than the other Ensifer feathers, as far as I can understand right now from my experience. So increasing the thickness of the edge in theory should mean more weight on the sword, but it's basically not the case. In fact, this sword is lighter than the light version of the standard Ensifer feather, which is this sword weighs 1,450 more or less grams. So it's kind of light in terms of feathers, is on the light side, and this is because this big fuller which runs on the sword. So basically the entire blade is a big huge fuller which leaves some weight from the sword. So this sword is kind of light compared to the thickness of the edge, and so in this way you have both the good sides. So you have the good sides of having a big edge, as I said before, which makes the sword more resistant and more durable, but you have also the lightness of basically light Ensifer feather, which is the most interesting feature in my opinion of the light short version of the Ensifer feathers. So this feather maintains another feature which I really like about the short Ensifer feathers. The fact that compared to the other feather shirts around right now is quite short. Of course, its overall length is 125 centimeters, and in my opinion is probably the best length for a longsword. So in general, if you are practicing longsword, you should aim for this kind of length more than 135. Of course, this is only my opinion. For the Fiore practice, this feather is perfect, basically. Another interesting feature of this feather is its presence in the bind. So compared to the standard light Ensifer feather, this feather has far more presence, far more weight, let's say, when binding another sword. In fact, when I am fencing against my other Ensifer feather, which happened basically yesterday, I have noticed that I was far more stronger in the bind, not only because of course my let's say muscles or whatever, but simply because of the blade, which have this interesting weight distribution, which makes it lighter of course, but far more present in the bind. This is probably due to, of course, the geometry of the sword. We have seen till now, this new blade, these new edges, but it's also probably of the, as I said, the weight distribution made by Ian, the main smith of Ensifer, or better, Ensifer himself, basically, which followed the studies of Peter Johnson in regards of longsword to project this kind of sword. In fact, as you are watching right now, this feather has the forward pivot point on the tip, basically, which is the ideal spot in which you want to have the forward pivot point in a longsword. And this is one of the hints that makes me think that is, of course, the weight distribution that helps this sword in the bind so much. So let's talk about safety now. This sword flexes enough. So as you can see, I don't have big problems in flexing them, quite a lot also in this way. When I practiced sparring and personal lessons with my student, I noticed that this blade is safe for thrusting in sparring. So if you are practicing regular sparring with full protection or whatever, this sword flexes enough. So I will say that is in the medium range of flexing. So it's not too flexible and is not stiff, is average. I will try to test this, the blade on a scale to let you know which kind of weight you should apply, more or less, of course, to start the flex. This is, of course, not a hyper-precise way of understanding how much weight you have to put on the tip to make it flex, but is better than nothing. So, as I said, for sparring, this blade is safe, is perfect. I think is also extremely good for tournaments. You should not have any problem in terms of flexion of the blade, at least in my understanding and in my experience. You also have to know that if you are practicing personal lessons, if you are an instructor which gives personal lessons to the students and you end up receiving a lot of thrusts, this sword is not the ideal. So the standard light feather of Ensifer in this case is better because it flexes a little bit more, and so you feel less these innumerable thrusts which you end up receiving when you are giving personal lessons. So speaking as a fencer, this sword is extremely good for pair drills and for sparring. Speaking as an instructor which ends up receiving a lot of thrusts in a static position, more or less, this blade is okay. So I would prefer to receive more thrusts from the standard light Ensifer feather, which flexes more. So now we are going to watch the other interesting features of this sword compared to the standard Ensifer feathers. Now the first one is the enlarged tip. Now in general the Ensifer feathers have a rounded tip. This one, as far as I know, is the first with the enlarged tip, which is better for two motivations. The first one is safety, because I will say that this tip is slightly larger compared to the rounded tip. So this is one a good point in favor of this tip compared to the other. The second motivation is that it is more durable. Now sometimes a rounded tip endures for all the life of the sword, but sometimes not. Of course, it depends from sword to sword. You can't be sure that every kind of sword is identical. So this feature makes your sword more durable again. Another things which interesting in terms of durability is that the sword, the crossguard of the sword is pinned to the blade itself, to the shield. So this feature should stop the problem which in general I hate a lot, which is the moving across So when the cross starts to move and to rattle, I really hate this kind of thing. It makes me mad. It's not a real problem in general in terms of the functionality of the sword, but speaking about myself at least, it makes my mind blow. So this pinned crossguard should stop this kind of problem. And speaking about myself, this is an extremely interesting and cool feature. Speaking about the handle is basically more or less the same. I would say is the same compared to the standard Ensifer short. The pommel instead is slightly changed. Is a little bit thinner on the base of the pommel. The pommel itself here is basically identical, but at the base is thinner. I think personally that this feature is good, is a good choice, because I can place my hand here in a better way. I feel that this pommel, I tend to grip the sword in this way, so I feel that this pommel shape fits a little bit more my hand, this part of my hand. So I will say that this is the last feature that these swords have compared, the new feature that this sword have compared to the standard short Ensifer feather. Now my general feeling about the sword. So I have tested it for, as I said, 10 days. I've done 6-7 sparring with this, some of them really strong. This sword is extremely durable. It doesn't have any problem, I think, in these regards. So it's extremely strong. In terms of, let's say, motion, in terms of handling, is, I will say, better than the standard Ensifer feather, because of this, let's say, this slightly more presence in the blade. You feel that the blade wants to go down in your arching cuts. So in some ways is a little bit more sword-like. So it has more the feeling of a real sword compared to the old model, let's say. I really appreciated this sword. So by now, I will say with basically no doubt that this feather is my favorite one. I doesn't had any issue with it. I think that will endure far more. I still have my old Ensifer. As I said, in general, Ensifer swords are quite sturdy, but this one will probably be far more sturdy than the average Ensifer sword. So I'm extremely happy of having it, and basically that's it. So this is the new Corona Ensifer sword, and if you want to buy it, I will leave the link of the Ensifer internet site in the video description, together with all the standard measures of this sword. Because I doesn't wanted to mention them, I will probably also put them on the video in some parts. I don't mention it every single length measure of the sword, because you can find them, of course, in the internet site, and you will see these measures both in the video and in the video description. So guys, I hope this video will help you. I hope you liked this review. If you have any other question about this kind of feather, of this kind of sword, just ask me whatever you want in the comment section. So, as always guys, thanks for watching, and well, see you next time.